Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Monday, the 10th of July. Today, I'm going to fess up right away. It's not going to be a good day. I think it will be a beautiful day, but it's going to be a tough day. You see, today, sorry, balancing the computer on my knee. Today, later on in the afternoon at 1 o'clock, I will be officiating the funeral for a 5.5-week-old baby boy. An absolutely beautiful little boy named Wyatt who had two adorable older sisters who loved him and two young parents who are doing an incredible job of just hanging in, keeping it together. And so death is on my mind, and just the awareness that the prayers that we have, the way that we talk about death in the church, it's not meant for a 5.5-week-old. Well, the ideal is when somebody's 90 and they've lived a great life and the family can gather, and the 5.5-week-old is the great grandchild who's had a chance to sit in grandpa or grandma's lap before they said farewell. And this whole death thing, I know it seems depressing, but you know what? Sometimes we have to go there. And I'm really scared that in our lives we have gone to a place where we have sanitized the end of life so much that we don't know how to deal with it. I have an incredible member of the congregation from Edgerton. His name is Jim, who is he's he doesn't like change much. I'll put it that way. He's very wed to our old prayer book. So if you've ever been in the church, especially the Episcopal or the Anglican church, you know that we every once in a while, not very often, we change things up. We get them up to date. It's part of being Anglican. One of the big things about Thomas Cranmer and moving from the Roman Catholic Church or the Catholic Church into the Anglican Church of England or the Church of England way back in the 1500s. Part of it, yes, we can talk about King Henry VIII and all his wives, but part of it was also bringing the language of the liturgy, the language of the church into the vernacular so that the average person who couldn't read and wouldn't have understood Latin could understand what was being said, could understand the prayers, could understand what the Bible readings were about, not just have to interpret them from stained glass windows and things like that. And so every once in a while, the Anglican Church does step up and brings in new liturgies. One of them, I'm so excited to say, is our General Synod met a week and a half ago, and they brought in new liturgies for people who are discerning, trans people who are discerning and going through the process of change. That we now have prayers, liturgies approved that we can use to pray with them and to celebrate with them and to do that hard work of what it means for them. And that's awesome. But in the Anglican Church of Canada, we don't change much or very often. And so we hang on to our old books. And so every once in a while, especially if Jim's going to lead morning prayer for me, I try to pull out the books, the hymns from the old blue hymn book. And it's an old book. It's prior to my birth, put it that way. And I was looking through them the other day and realizing that these children's hymns, they have a whole section of children's hymns. And at first I thought, these are not children's hymns. Like Onward Christian Soldiers is a children's hymn. And some other hymns, and it talks about death and people dying. And it's like, how are these children's hymns? And then I came across that prayer that I can't for the life of me remember now when I was taught to pray. My mom taught us to pray. Now I lay me down to sleep. And she taught us a version of that prayer, but the original says, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." And I know why my mom changed it, and I'm glad she did at that time. But now, looking back in life, I'm thinking we have done ourselves, our generation, and the generations that come after us, a considerable disservice by sanitizing death. We don't sing words of death. We sing hymns that talk about glory and, being with God and, angels in heaven and, things like that. But we do not talk about death. The number of times I have had conversations, even with undertakers, even with the people who run funeral homes, that talk about so and so passed. They passed. I say, what did they pass their math exam? They passed. They bought, somebody will say, oh, they bought the farm. You know, we don't say the word die. We don't talk about death. We don't acknowledge that it's going to happen. And sometimes it's not clean. Sometimes it is long and drawn out and it's messy. And sometimes it is so fast that it takes us unawares and it breaks our hearts. But because we don't talk about death, because we don't acknowledge it on a regular basis and allow it to be a regular part of who we are as people, not even just Christians, but as people, when it happens, we don't know how to deal with it. A few weeks ago, I posted a video, let's talk about sex. Got a bit of flack on that, but a lot of really good insights. And it was the same idea. When we stop talking about something honestly, using the real words, the real terms, when we don't talk about something, then we create an atmosphere that breeds ignorance, and it breeds misunderstandings, and it breeds absolute like myth, like untruths. And we have done ourselves a disservice in our world by not acknowledging that death is real and it's a part of every life. As they say, the only things that are constant are death and taxes. Yeah, and apparently there's some people who don't have to pay taxes. So, but we all die. You know, there's rich people who try to, the cryogenics and all that stuff. I'm sorry, but when your heart stops beating and your soul goes up to be with Jesus, you've died. Period. Now, they may find a way to bring you back, but guess what? You died. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to be able to talk about it. The idea that people don't acknowledge it, that don't recognize it, they pretend it's not going to happen, is devastating. Yesterday, or 2 days ago on Saturday, after I met with Wyatt's family, I had to go and I did a funeral at a graveside. And I mean, it was like stinking hot, very, very hot. I had my cassock, which is a long black robe, with like lots and lots of buttons up the front and long sleeves. And then my surplice, which is a white robe that goes over top of it, kind of like what kids might wear if they want to look like an angel in the Christmas pageant or a ghost at Halloween. And I had my white stole on top of it. But I was standing outside. We were doing this. The whole service was outside of the grave. And in the middle of it, they wanted to, as an act of remembrance, as an act of saying farewell, they wanted to leave roses with the urn for Grandpa. And so the kids were coming forward. People, there was the three children, and then their children, the grandchildren, and then a whole passel full of incredible little great grandchildren. And they came up and they placed their roses really gently. And mom or dad would say, "Can I say goodbye to Grandpa? Say you love Papa," things like that. And the one little guy had his books. He's like, "I want to read Grandpa's story. I gotta say goodbye to Grandpa." And he was talking about the fact that Grandpa used to read him stories before he went to sleep. So he wanted to read story now to Grandpa now that he was forever asleep. And I mean, he was maybe 2.5, and it was beautiful. A little girl who brought up a rose that she wasn't supposed to bring up to put in, but she did right in the middle of the prayers, and it was beautiful. She came up and she stood on her tiptoes and she popped it in there, and she touched the urn, and she said, "I love you, Papa." She knows she's not going to see him. This family had done the work. Now their grandpa died, their great grandpa died in January, and they had a bit of a service in the funeral home, and they've had time to think about it, and they've had time to talk to the kids about it. And the kids didn't come expecting to see Grandpa or Papa, but they weren't surprised by seeing what they did see. Their parents had taken the time to talk about what they were doing, and that gave me hope, because we all need to acknowledge that death is a part of life. When we can acknowledge that in our own lives, I think we'll be better able to live. Our relationships will be better because we'll be able to talk about truth, and we'll be able to remember, hopefully, to tell people we love them, to share with them what we thought was important about them, what was the best part of who they were, what lessons did they teach us. And maybe they can share with us before it's too late the lessons that we shared with them. or how much they loved us. But we cannot sanitize life so much that death is not a part of it. We need to acknowledge and name it and stop skirting around it. And he went to meet his maker. They passed that passing. I apologize if that's the way that you refer to someone dying and that's comfortable for you. Okay, but as a priest, I'm just going to tell you, it's hard because saying somebody passed, it feels like you're not dealing with it. It feels like we're skirting around the word death. And you know what? We need to take the negativity away from it. We need to recognize that death, it's the beginning of new life. For Christians, it is the beginning of new life. It is the beginning of entering into that eternity that we have longed for, whether we realize it or not. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that and not pretend it's not going to happen. And maybe when we acknowledge it, then we can acknowledge also that we might be scared of it because we don't know the answers and we're worried about what might or might not happen. But those are conversations we need to have. They're conversations we need to have with each other. They're conversations we need to have with a priest or a doctor or a neighbor or our spouse or children, our parents. But we can't do that if we can't first acknowledge that death is real, death is inevitable, and it will happen to each and every one of us. So, say it with me. Death, 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 death. It doesn't hurt to say it. It really doesn't. But what it might do is help us to be more open to saying it and hearing it. And then for those other people around us who might be scared of it, if they know that we're not, maybe we can help them to not be scared of it too. What do you think? I'm going to go now and get ready. Get ready to say goodbye to a 5.5-week-old baby and to be with his family and the whole community as we gather together to hold each other up through death. And maybe tomorrow I'll have a happier topic. But today I think we just need to stay here in this moment and allow it to be real. God bless you for allowing me your presence with me as it is real for me. Have a good day. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael.